They say the wind in Drabbone Canyon carries more than dust. Sometimes it carries voices, lost prayers, and the names of the dead. On one such windless afternoon, beneath a sky the color of scorched bone, Caleb Thorne saw a figure stumbling toward his gate. She came from the horizon like a ghost, barefoot, her dress torn to rags, skin the shade of ash. For a long moment, Caleb didn't move from the porch. He watched her sway, then collapse like a sack of grain into the dirt, just 10 feet from the fence. He stood slowly, the wood groaning beneath his boots, and walked to her side, without a word. She was breathing barely. Sunburned shoulders twitched under cracked linen. Lips blistered. Eyes closed. He lifted her gently and carried her across the dusty yard, through the doorway of a house built with his own hands, board by patient board. Inside, he laid her on the narrow cot near the hearth, fetched a basin of well water, and pressed a damp cloth to her brow. She didn't stir until dusk. When she did, her voice was little more than a rasp. "They're coming," she whispered. "Please." Caleb didn't ask who. He didn't ask why. He simply nodded, fed the fire, and brought her broth that she couldn't quite swallow. She fell asleep again, sweat soaking the pillow, breath light as cotton. That night, Caleb sat alone at the table, the only sound the wind sifting through chinks in the walls. His hands, rough and calloused, reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded photograph. He placed it on the table, smoothing the creases. The edges had yellowed. The image was faded, but the face remained clear, a young woman, hair pinned up, wearing a dress with lace at the collar. A bride. Her expression was solemn, as if she knew something the photographer didn't. Caleb stared at it for a long time, the firelight flickering across his features, lined, weather-worn, eyes like tarnished silver. He looked back toward the cot. The resemblance was uncanny, not just similar, identical, as though the woman in the photo had stepped through time and emerged, battered and half dead, on his land. Morning brought a stillness, as if the canyon itself held its breath. The woman woke coughing and tried to sit up. Caleb moved to her side with quiet purpose. "Water," she croaked. He helped her drink, then handed her a piece of bread. She took a bite like she hadn't eaten in days. When her strength allowed, she looked around the small cabin, sparse, utilitarian, a rifle above the door, a tin of coffee by the stove. "You live alone?" she asked. Caleb nodded once. "You help me." "Why?" He shrugged. Didn't see a reason not to. She stared at him, eyes narrowing. "They were chasing me. You saw no reason. I've seen enough bad men. Let him come." Her eyes welled up. She wiped them with the back of her hand. "I'm Lila," she said. "I don't know how far I ran. I just kept going. I thought I was going to die out there." He nodded again, saying nothing. She hesitated, then added, "They call themselves the Black Spur Riders. You heard of them?" Caleb's jaw tightened. He stood and crossed the room to the window, eyes scanning the distant horizon. "They're killers," she continued. "They took me from a town east of here. Said I was to be married to their leader, Judge Ringo. He calls himself Judge Ringo now. I escaped before the wedding. Took something he wants back." Caleb turned. "What?" Lila hesitated. "It's safer you don't know." He considered her a moment, then walked to a shelf, pulled down a box made of dark wood, and set it on the table. From inside, he took a leather pouch, removed a few coins, and returned the rest. The box closed with a click. Then he looked at her again. "You're not her," he said. She blinked. "What?" He held up the photograph, carefully, as if it might shatter. "I've carried this for years, through rain, frost, and fire. Every trail I rode, I kept it close. Told myself I'd know her again if I saw her." Lila's eyes fell to the photo. Her lips parted. "That's me." Caleb shook his head. "It's her. Her name was Lila, too." She looked from the image to him, something unsteady rising in her chest. "I don't remember. I was very young when they took me. I thought I dreamed my name. But that dress, I've seen it before. In dreams." Caleb said nothing for a long time. The silence stretched like a rope between them. Finally he said, "You should rest. If they're coming, I'll need to prepare." She nodded slowly, still staring at the photograph. Caleb placed it back in his coat. Then he walked outside, into the early light, toward the barn. Inside, he passed the stalls, ignored the saddles, and made his way to the far wall. There, beneath a loose plank, he knelt and lifted out a rusted tin box. He opened it. Inside lay a marshal's badge, dulled by time. He closed the box again. The canyon was quiet, but Caleb knew that silence meant they were close. The Black Spur riders had the scent, and this time, Caleb Thorne wasn't going to run. The wind shifted that afternoon, curling in from the west with a scent of sweat and iron. Caleb stood on the ridge above the canyon, scanning the distance. He didn't need a spyglass to feel it in his bones. The riders were near. Vultures circled far off, wheeling lazily over the flats. A sure sign. Death was coming. Back at the cabin, Lila paced the hard-packed floor. The fever had broken, but she still moved like her limbs remembered starvation. Her eyes, though, those had sharpened. She watched Caleb through the window, saw how he walked the land like it had once been his kingdom. "How many?" she asked when he returned. "Too many," he said, brushing dust from his hat. "But this canyon's a beast they don't know." "I do." Lila bit her lip. "You said she had my name. The woman in the photo." Caleb didn't look at her. "They took you young. I never found a body." "I remember music," she said. "A fiddle, and flowers on a table. Someone kissed my forehead and said I'd come home soon." He nodded once, grim. "You were supposed to be my bride. Ringo took that from us both." Lila's breath caught. Her eyes misted, but she blinked it away fast. "He told me I was nobody. Property. I was 13 when he bought me from a trader near Mesa Hollow." Caleb's fingers flexed as if itching for a trigger. "He's killed lawmen, burned down towns. Now he's crossed into a place where that don't matter anymore." They spent the next hours preparing. Caleb worked with calm precision, like a man reacquainting himself with an old dance. He checked the choke points, narrow gaps between rock walls, hidden gullies, a dry riverbed perfect for ambush. He buried tripwires, strung from cactus spine to old iron nails. Loaded rifles, oiled the six-shooter that hadn't fired in years. Lila watched, then stepped forward and held out her hand. "I want to help." Caleb eyed her. "Ever shot a man?" She shook her head. "But I'm done running." He gave her a revolver, showed her how to cock, aim, and squeeze slow. She practiced on a rusted horseshoe nailed to a post. Missed twice. Hit once. Nodded to herself. As the sun dipped low, Caleb stepped into the barn and pulled a tarp from an old horse. The beast stamped and snorted, recognizing the scent of powder and blood in the air. He saddled it anyway. "They'll come at dawn," he said. Lila didn't sleep. Neither did Caleb. They sat by the fire, silent, the flames dancing shadows across the walls. "Why'd you stop being a marshal?" she asked finally. "I didn't," he said. "They just stopped believing I was one." He told her how it happened, how Jud Ringo, once a small-time thief, charmed a deputy into betrayal, how they hijacked a prisoner wagon, slaughtered 2 marshals, and left Caleb bleeding in the scrublands, how he crawled 3 miles with a shattered leg to a water hole, how he lived. "And the badge?" Lila asked. He reached into his coat and set it on the table. "Still mine," he said. "Just heavier now." The sky turned pale behind a ridge. Cold light crept across the canyon floor. Caleb stood, fastened his coat, and stepped outside. Then came the thunder. Not of storms, but hooves. 10, maybe more. Dust plumed over the ridge like smoke. The first rider appeared, then 3 more, bandanas, rifles, black spurs catching sun. The last to crest the hill road taller than the rest, coat flapping like a crow's wings, hat pulled low. "Jud Ringo." He looked down at the cabin and grinned. "Well," he called, "either that's a mirage or Thorne's ghost come home to roost." Caleb didn't answer. He watched, still as stone. Ringo turned in the saddle. "Find the girl. Kill the man. Keep the horse." The gang split into 2 columns and descended. Lila crouched behind a boulder, revolver trembling in her grip. Caleb disappeared into a notch between rocks. The first trap snapped a horse's leg clean. The beast screamed and toppled, throwing its rider into a ravine. The second tripped a wire that set off a shotgun nailed to a tree trunk, firing point-blank into the chest of a bandit named Crick. He dropped without a sound. Gunfire erupted. Echoes bounced off the walls in every direction. Caleb moved like smoke, always one step ahead. He fired once, clean, deliberate, striking a rider square between the eyes as the man tried to flank the ridge. Another fell to Lila's shaky shot. More luck than aim, but she didn't look away afterward. Just reloaded, slower this time, breathing steady. Ringo's grin had faded. He dismounted and advanced on foot, weaving through brush, pistol in hand. "Come on, Thorn. Come show me if you still bleed." Caleb crouched behind a boulder, watching him draw near. His hands didn't tremble. Not this time. From behind a rock pile, Lila watched as the man who had haunted her life for a decade crept within 10 feet of Caleb's hiding place. Her jaw tightened. She stepped into view. "Ringo." He turned, startled. She fired. Missed. But it gave Caleb the moment. He rose and fired once, the bullet catching Ringo just above the belt. The outlaw staggered, eyes wide, and fell to his knees. Blood soaked into the dust. Caleb walked forward, slow and measured. Ringo coughed once and tried to raise his pistol. Caleb kicked it away. "Marshal," Ringo rasped. "Still pretending." "No," Caleb said. "Just remembering." Then the sun rose, full and unyielding, and the canyon fell silent but for the wind. The smoke still clung to the canyon air, thick and bitter as burnt sage. Silence rolled in its wake, heavy and final. The gang lay scattered across the rocks like discarded cards, bodies twisted where justice had caught up with them. Vultures circled lower now. Caleb knelt beside Ringo's corpse. The outlaw's eyes were still open, cloudy with disbelief. One hand was curled, as if still trying to hold power in his last breath. Caleb shut those eyes with 2 fingers, then rose without ceremony. Lila stood on the ridge, her revolver limp in her hand. Her dress was torn at the hem, her arms streaked with soot, but she held herself with a strange grace, like someone who had just remembered who they were. "You all right?" Caleb asked, brushing dust from his coat. She nodded, slow and wordless. They didn't speak again until they returned to the cabin. Caleb poured water into a basin, rinsed blood from his hands, then cleaned his weapons with practiced care. Lila leaned against the doorframe, watching him work. "I was sure I'd die with him," she said. "You didn't." He said I was bought, raised in his world. But that photo, that dress, that life, I felt it, even if I couldn't name it. Caleb glanced up. "You were 5 when they took you. Town blamed me. Said I should have protected you. Said a lawman shouldn't have a family if he can't keep him safe." They were wrong. He didn't answer, just set the rifle aside and took out the photo again. This time, he handed it to her. She studied it closely. The lace, the eyes, the tilt of the mouth that matched her own. "I remember the flowers now," she said, voice cracking. "And a dog. Big black one. Used to bark at storms." "His name was Copper," Caleb said. "He howled for 2 days when you vanished." Tears slipped down her cheeks then, slow and unguarded. She didn't wipe them away. "All those years, I thought I was no one. Thought maybe the hurt I carried was something I was born with. Turns out, it was just something stolen." Caleb sat down opposite her, face weathered like an old tree scarred by lightning. "You were never nothing. They just tried to make you forget." Outside, the wind picked up, scattering dust across the porch. A storm was building over the mesa, slow, distant thunder rumbling like hooves on hollow ground. Lila stepped out into it, breathing deep. The sky rolled with bruise-colored clouds. "What'll you do now?" she asked. Caleb followed her gaze. "Clean up. Bury the bodies. Tell the next town what happened here. They'll call you a hero." He grunted. "They'll call me what they want. Won't change what I lost." Lila looked at him then, not as a stranger or a savior, but as someone who had carried the same wound she had, only longer. "You didn't lose everything." He said nothing. She stepped forward, placing the photograph gently into his hand. "This was a memory once. Let's make it a beginning." Down in the canyon, the last of the smoke thinned and lifted. The sun, fierce and gold, broke through the clouds like judgment. The land exhaled, quiet and raw. Later that day, Caleb hammered a fresh cross into the red earth beside the others. Beneath it, he laid Ringo to rest, not out of mercy, but to seal a story that had gone on too long. Lila helped him plant wildflowers near the graves. She didn't speak as she worked, but there was a rhythm to her movements, steady and sure. That night, they sat on the porch. No fire, no need. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't emptiness now. It was shared history. "You could stay," Caleb said, his voice nearly swallowed by the dusk. Lila looked out toward the canyon's edge. "Or we ride east. Together." He turned to her, eyes glinting. "You ready for that?" "I've been ready since I found that photo," she said. "I just didn't know who I was looking for." And in the hush that followed, the canyon finally let go of its ghosts.